Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is episode number 55 of the Sports Consiglieres Podcast. I am your host, Jim Whalen. Along with me is the diehard Knick fan, Tim Thibodeau, former fan club president, Jerry Calla. Jerry, how you doing on this fine Wednesday?
Absolutely. The Tom Thibodeau era has come to an end. Um, Shocked, stunned, perplexed were my initial thoughts, as were probably most Knick fans. And then I think what happens is Thibodeau gets fired, and then right away the assumption is, okay, who's the big name candidate out there, which is Michael Malone, who won an NBA title. And apparently, Coach Malone, the Queens native, is not even a candidate. So where they go from here poses an interesting question. You know, everybody wants Jay Wright. Well, not everybody, but Jay Wright, the whole Nova connection. Again, Coach Wright is 63, making good money for making a few appearances a year. I don't know why he would want that, at this stage of his career, so to speak. I think if I was a betting man, which I am not, I would put all my chips on the Johnny Bryant card as the next head coach of the New York Knicks. For those of you who don't know, Johnny Bryant has a very strong relationship, particularly with Worldwide Wes, who's
Yeah.
involved with Leon Rose. Johnny Bryant was previously with the Knicks, and he was and did a great job as Kenny Atkinson's right-hand guy for the Cavaliers, who wound up being the 1 seed this season. So again, his title was associate head coach with the Cavaliers. His background, if you will, he had the Bryant School of Basketball a long, long time ago, and he started out in the NBA as the developmental coach, I believe, of Utah, if I'm not mistaken. And again, it just poses an interesting question. We've talked off camera with our producer. This is the best the farthest the Knicks have gotten in 25 years. But I think any Knick fan who is around our age that lived through, some dismal basketball, the post, I like to call it the post Van Gundy Knicks. We had Isaiah. That was a complete, nightmare. Phil Jackson probably is in the same boat, if you will, as being an absolute disaster with Isaiah. Donnie Walsh gave us some life for a few years,
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was
if
a New
you
York.
will. He came in and he
Yeah.
professionalized, or I should say, made the organization professional again. And we could start rattling off names,
Yeah.
Hornacek. I mean, Dave
Yeah,
Fizdale.
Woodson, Fisher, Hornacek, Fizdale, Mike Miller, 5 coaches in 7 years. But I got to ask you, Jerry, how did the Knicks get to this point? You figure with Thibodeau, like I said, 1 playoff appearance. I think their record was, I think I got notes here, 178 and 365. So they've been abysmal.
Yeah,
And
abysmal. And
here's
again, just to touch on one thing, and I always thought that Mike Woodson, I thought he got a raw deal. I really did. They had some success. They had some playoff success under him. They brought in a few veterans with Carmelo, and I thought he did a really good job. And ultimately, Jackson came in. He had that verbal agreement with Steve Kerr to be the next coach, which obviously didn't happen. And then we somehow got Jeff Hornacek, who had really no relation to Jackson. And it just goes to show you the amount. I mean, we were sold on Tim Hardaway as being the next big shooting guard, and we could go on and on and on. And there was a lot of dismal basketball. There was a lot of dismal personnel moves. But again, you talking about Coach Thibodeau. This, if he were to remain with the Knicks, he was on pace to be the third winningest coach in franchise history, behind Red Holtzman and Joe Lapchick, who are two legends. Holtzman has the
absolutely
two
2 legends. Yeah.
titles. And Lapchick is just a New York City basketball legend. And again, what was the reason they came to this decision? So far, that's a little tight-lipped. The only thing I think we've gotten so far is that, obviously they felt that he could get them, or he got them the furthest he could get them. And I was shocked. I was at a meeting yesterday. Somebody told me, "Oh, the Knicks just fired Thibodeau." I thought they were actually messing with me, considering the night of the elimination game that the star player did more than give him a vote of confidence in returning. So where do they go from here? I can't imagine, them hiring somebody. I don't want to say new, because Johnny Bryant would be new, so to speak, to a head coaching position, but they're not going to hire somebody that they don't have a relationship with. And I think, from what I'm reading and what I'm hearing, all signs are pointing to him. And again, it's been made clear. Stefan Bondi of the Post reports that it is 100% clear that Malone is not a candidate. If I had a guess to why, he has two things going against him. Actually three. Number one, he had a very tenacious relationship is the word. Tenacious is the word I'll use, relationship with the front office. Number two, he really had issues getting along with his star player. And number three, you could reference his record pre-Denver, which is abysmal. And again, I don't understand this move. I think if they fired Thibodeau and hired Malone, I think people would kind of understand that. But to me, it's a head scratcher, and ultimately, this is the way the gentleman's being rewarded. I mean, was it a great series? No. It started in game one. And while we're on the Knicks, just to get off Thibodeau for a second, is the villain, or who's being portrayed as the villain, is the cat. Okay?
Yes.
So let me break this down to everybody. Karl Anthony Towns is a very, very good basketball player. Okay, I thought it was a tremendous trade in giving away Randall, getting him. Here's a newsflash: Karl Anthony Towns was a poor defender before the playoffs. He is slow-footed. That didn't happen during the playoffs. So he is being made out to be the villain. Yes, he has defensive liabilities. Jalen Brunson has defensive liabilities. Those liabilities rose to the top. The Pacers exploited them. You want to fault Thibodeau for not trying to cover those defensive liabilities up? The Knicks tried doing that. Hence, they made the trade with the Nets to get Bridges, a former defensive player of the year. OG, who quickly became probably my favorite player this particular playoff season, if you will, and then especially in the playoffs, another good defender. So they did bring in personnel, okay, to overcome those defensive liabilities. Bridges, for me, defended when the playoffs first started. As it progressed, he didn't defend, okay, as much or as capable as he is. And I just don't think, I mean, listen, you talk about Greg Giannotti ripping Towns, calling him a loser. I think that's over the top. I know it's New York. We need a villain, especially after the team, was this close to making the NBA Finals. Karl Anthony Towns didn't blow the lead in game one. It was a culmination of things. And I think the thing that really stands out to me, yes, there were defensive breakdowns. There were defensive liabilities. We can go on and on. But also the amount of turnovers committed, and Indiana, the amount of points scored off those turnovers, is basketball 101. And again, I'm shocked. And we'll go from here. What I was expecting, and I'll turn it back over to you in a second, what I was expecting was Thibodeau to return, and then for the Knicks to make a very big trade, a splash, and really change the roster and make a big splash, during a some sort of a sign and trade, or even trading the cat. I mean, I wasn't expecting Thibodeau to get fired. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
And I agree with you. I don't think that anybody thought that Thibodeau was going to get fired. Really, looking at his body of work, 226 and 174, 4 playoff appearances with two conference finals. I think in the series he used every tool in his toolbox. And I first heard about the firing last week, and they were talking about the Knicks having fatigue, which I don't necessarily thought that was the case, but I think that one with Indiana, I think Halliburton is a stud. He's a star, and I don't think really we had anybody to really match Halliburton. And they also had a deep bench. Their bench was better than our bench. Our bench played well, and willed them the victory the one game. But I think that it was Indiana's year. I don't think Thibodeau deserved to be fired, and not only that, the amount of money that Dolan's going to have to pay him too. I mean, they just restructured his deal. There's a lot of money on the table, and I think that you're right. They're probably not going to go with a college coach. I've heard even crazy that Danny Hurley and Steve Peichel from Rutgers was going to take over UConn. I even heard the new Villanova coach taking over the Knicks job. So I mean, the Twitter world was on fire last night about the changes. But there are some names out there. I thought we were texting yesterday. I thought Malone was probably being an easy choice. You also had Dave Bliss was out there. He's OKC assistant. They're in the finals. James Borrego, he's on the Popovich tree. You also had Boonhauser, who won in Milwaukee, who's still out there. I think Phoenix just got their guy in Ott. They just hired it.
They hired Ott today. That was officially.
So that's a big NBA. And then you look at Johnny Bryant, Cavs, and that's Knicks. So he has a relationship with the Knicks. He also Worldwide West. William Wesley, he's involved with Leon Rose. He made his chops with Calipari. He was kind of like the scout to get the players, and listen, good for him. He made something of himself as far as scouting players, and now he's on the NBA. But I think that it's a confusing time for Knicks. I think whoever comes in there is a lot of pressure. And as far as Cat, I think the reason why he's getting a lot of criticism is just a paycheck. And I think they used him well in the series, having him up on top of the key, either shooting or driving. But I think that, and I think, I thought they played as well as good, but they just had a lot of turnovers and a lot of dry spots where they didn't score. And Naismith in that first game, I really think that set the tone for the series. I mean, with that 6 threes, if they won game one, the series would have been better. Maybe the conversation today would have been a little bit different. But those are my thoughts on it. So, but I don't.
I do agree with your point on that, Jimmy. Is that I believe he was fired based on the Pacers series, right, wrong, or indifferent. He was fired not on the body of work. He was fired on what the way the Knicks were exposed. Okay, in the series. I'll say this. Before game 3, Kenny Smith did make a very good, on the pregame, made a tremendous joking point, which was if Thibodeau was a baseball manager, he wouldn't play 9 guys, right? Now you go, I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Now you go out. He has, he's of that old school Pat Riley, Jeff Van Gundy. When the postseason comes, the rotation gets tighter. Riley did that way back with the Lakers, with the Knicks, with the Heat. A 10-man rotation became an 8-man rotation in the postseason. But let me say this, is that game 3, you showed what he was capable of doing, is that he had to call on guys that weren't expected to be called on, okay, because the Knicks were in foul trouble. He used his bench, okay, they won game 3. So I understand the whole thing. Oh, these guys lagged heavy minutes. He's a one-trick pony, so to speak. He doesn't adjust. I thought game 3, if you talk about a coach being able to evolve. And I know the circumstances caused him to do that, but I thought he played from a personnel standpoint. He managed game 3 very, very well, which turned out to be a nice comeback victory for the Knicks. We could sit here and go all day. I'm still stunned because of this fact. You fire a man that's on Thibodeau's level. You were a stone's throw away from the NBA Finals. You fire him, and there's no immediate candidate in place, so to speak, that big name. Like, for example, and I'm going to go back now because I was always intrigued by this guy's career. In 03, I believe it was 03, Carlisle got eliminated with that very, very, very unique and dynamic Piston team. Rasheed, Chauncey, Ben Wallace, Rip. Who comes in, granted he was politicking for the job, right, was Larry Brown. Okay. They win the title, okay, the next year.
That's 04, right? They won the title 04?
04, yes. Yeah. So I guess this is after the 03 season Brown comes in. So the question is, at the time, people would thought that Carlisle, being a younger coach, it's crazy that, he just beat the Knicks, and we're talking something that happened, over 20 years ago. Okay. And I'm a big Carlisle fan, but people felt Carlisle, got screwed back then. But again, Larry Brown was in the wings. He was the hired gun, the hot hand. If they would have, again, I'll say it, if they would have said, hey, Malone's our guy, we're getting Malone. All right. People would understand that. The guy's an NBA champion, yada, yada, yada. That's not the case. And now we're going to bring in a lot of a team with a lot of personalities. Like you said, the pressure is high. The team just went, to the NBA Eastern Conference Finals. Okay. And now let's say they do make a big trade. They change things up. They bring in the Greek Freak. They bring in Giannis. They bring in Devin Booker, whatever. Now I think the pressure is even tenfold because now you're making, you're coming in, taking over an Eastern Conference Finals team with making a further splash. So it's going to be very, very interesting. As it says, the life as a Knicks fan, even in the good times, things just always seem to go a little sideways. And we shall see in these coming weeks.
So, yeah, well, we'll see who the candidate is, but it really scratches your head. I mean, I could see if he had a problem with one of the players. I mean, getting back to the game, I thought defensively they stopped Brunson really to work his magic. They really didn't allow him to do what he did, and I thought Hart could have played better, but he just seemed he couldn't find his game during that series. That's going to happen to a professional player, but just couldn't find his game. I thought Bridges played well. He made big shots when he could.
He did.
Yeah. Mitchell Robinson, I thought played very well. I mean, very, very well defensively, and also Thibodeau changed the lineup too. I mean, he had Mitchell.
That's
Robinson.
Another good point. Correct.
So he had him start one game, and he wasn't afraid to sit Hart down and not start him, have him come off the bench, but.
Hart, I think, as popular as he is with Knicks fans, he had a disappointing series.
Yep.
Way too many turnovers, and I don't think Robinson got enough credit rebounding on both ends of the court. He's a presence there. Robinson gave you what he needed to give you, and so he delivered.
Yeah,
he delivered.
He definitely delivered. Are you surprised in the final game he didn't go to his bench more, Thibodeau?
Defensively, yes.
So what? I mean, looking back to the game, what would you have changed? I know it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but what would you have done?
See, I think what he was afraid of, and it got very ugly very quickly. He was trying to match offense for offense, which is why he stayed in the final game, which is why he stayed with the lineup. Should the Cat have maybe sat more? We can sit here and we can obviously answer that question, days later, right as the next series is supposed to start, and say, of course he should have sat. At the time, they couldn't score. They were having trouble scoring. They were having trouble defending. He rolled the dice and said, you know what, I'm going to leave offense out, see if we can get, a run going. It didn't happen.
Yeah. And then I even heard too, yeah, Mo Cheeks on his on his coaching staff. I even heard his name being around. I mean, Mark Jackson, like I said, Twitter world was bouncing around. So
I think
I
the
heard,
only people that are in candidates right now are you and I.
yeah,
That's
and
the
it's
power of
just
social
say,
media.
yeah, yeah, true, very
I
true.
would
But
be shocked, though, Jimmy. I would be shocked at this stage of the game that Leon Rose knows this team. He put it together. Somebody coming in, which I'll go back to my prediction of Johnny Bryant. He's bringing in somebody that knows these players, or most of these players, and the front office, who is Leon Rose, is familiar with. Case closed.
yeah, and I have to agree with that. What about the coaching staff? You think do you think the coaching staff stays in place? I mean, they're talking today on some of the sports shows about Rick Brunson, being still an assistant. I don't think any of the assistants got let go either. So the coaching staff is still in place. So which is kind of odd because usually when you let go to the head coach, usually a lot of the coaching staff
Correct.
will be let go too. So I just different scenario.
Again, Johnny Bryant comes in. That's obviously on him to put a coaching staff. I would venture to say some player. I don't know about Brunson. He might feel that maybe he wants to move on, considering the father-son dynamic. Maybe he doesn't want to deal with that. But I think first we have to see who the head coach is, and I think that there's a strong possibility you'll see some people retained. And like any coaching staff, I think, some people will get retained, and, Coach Bryant, if he decides to take this job, will be coming in, with probably one or two of his own people, as is, standard procedure, if you will.
And I agree with you. I think they're probably going to do a sign and trade somewhere because if you look at some of the free agents out there, it's really kind of a weak class, and I don't think the Knicks have too many free agents on their team that have to be signed. Achua is one of them. I could see them keeping him for a roster spot or him walking. So there's not really too many.
Right.
Deuce McBride, I think, is a restricted free agent, but there's not really too many players that everybody's kind of under contract, which is a good thing for the Knicks. You don't have to worry about trying to worry about signing somebody walking, but I think they are going to have to do a splash somewhere as far as just to get this team. And I think that you're going to have to be looking. You got to look Boston. I know Tatum's out, but I mean Halliburton's going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem. And then you got Detroit. I mean, you look at the Eastern Conference itself. I mean, Detroit looked good. They're up and coming team.
Up and coming is the term. Let's not forget too, and I think maybe we end the NBA talk with this. Let's not forget that the Pacers eliminated the number 1 seed, Cleveland Cavaliers.
True.
Very. Yeah. But not only did they eliminate them, very convincingly. Very convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like the Knicks series, they stole a game with the Cavaliers and really just propelled them into the next series. I mean, the Cavs had that series, that game. I believe it was game 2, but the Pacers came in and stole that game just like they stole game 1 at the Garden, which was shocking to most fans. But like I said, Thibodeau could have lost the team there. I think he righted the ship and he made it competitive. I'm surprised at it, but I think Thibodeau is he's 67. He's going to find a landing spot somewhere in some of these. But it's just the pedigree that he has. It was just tough to see, but behind closed doors, who knows what was happening? I think he didn't lose. I didn't think he lost the support of the team. I think the team was playing hard for him.
I agree. Up until the end.
Yeah, but this is his third coach and head coach. He was close in Chicago. He was close in Minnesota. He's close with the Knicks. So excellent coach, but his tenure with the Knicks is over now. So
yep.
So, but turning on, I know I was going to start this off with, but I know we wanted to get in with the Thibodeau stuff. Just the last couple episodes, recap, episode 52, we did the Shoeless Joe Jackson episode with 2 gentlemen who were part of the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum. Julius Joe Jackson was removed from the banned list or the ineligible list for the Hall of Fame. What were your thoughts on that episode? I thought we had three good guest episodes. So just recap those episodes and we'll
I
move
agree.
on to
So
it.
the Joe Jackson episode came at a great time for us. He was just removed from the baseball, being banned from Major League Baseball, which is crazy. It's been how many years that he's been banned. So now, since he's lifted, now he is eligible to be considered to the Hall of Fame. I thought they presented a lot of interesting facts, a lot of interesting stories, personal stories, and I thought it was a great episode. Um, you know, doing the research for that episode and some of the stuff I read after, I really enjoyed it. And I think what we're going to see going forward is Joe Jackson. I know they're two completely different cases, but I think for the Joe Jackson fan club, if you will, and the Pete Rose fan club, I think more or less both of those players are tied together moving forward with the Hall of Fame. Again, completely different circumstances, but I just think at this point, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward with both of those players. And like I said, the Joe Jackson episode was tremendous. And then
And
from there,
one retraction on that. Mike Nola, who I contacted, he's on the board of commissioners with the Julius Joe Jackson Hall of Fame Museum down in Greenville, South Carolina. I read a couple books after the Eight Men Out movie, and it sounded like, from what I read, that Joe Jackson did own a liquor store, and they almost like he was deep in the bottle. Mike Nolan said that was not the case. Yeah, he did have a couple of drinks before the testimony, but he said his wife, who sounded like a pretty tough woman, wouldn't have stayed with him if he went down that road. So he wanted to make sure that was out there. But I think I even read that in Eight Men Out, that part of the book. But he wanted to retract that. So, but anyway, going to episode number 53. Jerry.
him being clean, that doesn't sell.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
sell to the story.
Well, I think I even said that on the episode that by no means was he uh, clean as a baby, clean as a whistle. It wasn't the case.
Right.
And but tremendous player. The facts don't lie, and I think that most people will agree that they both need to be in the Hall of Fame. But it's almost a sad part because they even admitted once he's in, that's it. The legacy's over.
Correct.
What kept the nostalgia was that he wasn't in
Correct.
the Hall of Fame.
Correct.
So going into episode number 53, we had Billy Mitritronia, who is now the Half Hollow Hills West basketball coach, who had an interesting career. We were on the St. John's tip. I found his book online, The Last Redmen. So he played the last year that they were considered the Redmen before they went to the Red Storm. He wants to shop around his story for a screenplay. What do you think of that episode? I thought that we really got a lot of favorable reviews, favorable traction on Instagram. So obviously, he's in the basketball world. He's going to have a huge following, and the St. John's is going to have reignited their fan base. But what do you think of that episode? What would you take away from that?
I thought, let me say this: Billy's story is unbelievable from start to finish, and I think what made it really special for us is, yes, the story is what we all love. Us being from this area, Billy's a New York guy, New York, New Jersey type of guy. It's a great story about an underdog. But I think what made it even more special and even better, if you will, is that the way he told the story. He was a tremendous guest with a tremendous story. I have said this about a half dozen times. I said it when we had him on. I've said it since then, is that you look at the best sports stories, right? Individually, Rocky, Rudy, okay? You talk about a guy that never played never played a minute of high school basketball to go excel for 2 years at a Division III school, then to walk on at St. John. I mean, the whole story, how He's really almost his whole life is just circumstance, right? He doesn't go into work. He goes to this Catholic school
Yeah.
tournament.
Yeah,
He
because
gets discovered.
his friend was like, "What? You're not going to show up tonight?" So something as
Yeah,
simple as that.
yeah,
But
absolutely. And and
but
and
it
and that's what I think these little details that's these little tidbits that surround the story make it even more unbelievable. And again, as we know, I think we're both in agreement. There's they have documentaries of documentaries, 30 for 30s. This is something that needs to go. I don't even think a documentary. I think this should be on the big screen.
Well, he even called Billy even thanked us after, and he's actually because of our episode and what was on Instagram. Not to say we're taking credit for it. His story was his story, and he told it really seamlessly that he was getting some producers that were interested in it. And that's what he was looking to do, film the story. He definitely is a motivated guy. He
Yeah,
definitely is a goal oriented person. So he's still coaching. Has a player in the NBA. Not too many high school coaches could say that, but definitely cares. And I think that going from basically a street ball player to having a story on the big screen is a really special. But then talking about documentaries, and one story of mine was Hoop Dreams. I think that was like kind of one of the first uh, documentaries that kind of hit it big was, and we had Peter Gilbert on, who was the producer. He's doing something with NIL right now. Obviously, that's an area that a lot of these families and a lot of these players are going to have to navigate, transfer portal, everything else. He's doing a movie about that. What was your take on that episode? I know you didn't know too much about. That was more my episode. I kind of found it. I kind of pitched it to you, and you said, "All right, well, you'll probably take the lead on that one." But what was your take on that episode?
again, you're talking about a guy who I think is in a position now, right? He's at Wake Forest, okay, to really touch, students into developing projects and to making films and exploring different topics. I mean, Peter doesn't get enough credit. I mean, he put this out in 94 when nobody, and I mean nobody, was doing things like that. And if you look at the body of work, it's a great story. Two kids, rough area, getting hooked up. A legendary high school coach, a legendary high school where Isaiah went. The whole story. But again, the fact that that was almost 30 years ago, and we're still talking about it because what did it did, right? Peter did the project, came out in 94, and he ultimately doesn't get enough credit for paving the way for what has really come since then. 30 for 30s, shorts,
Yep.
these little 30 for 30 shorts that they have, all types of sports documentary, camera crews and writers following high school teams. The Miracle of St. Anthony. Kevin Boyle had that at St. Pat's. So
Yeah.
on and so forth. There's been many different projects, and again, I thought he was a great guest with a great story, and I think now it's more than fitting that he's in a position to really inspire people that are going to be doing this in the future. And to boot, he's working on probably one of the most polarizing, interesting topics now, which is the whole NIL transfer portal. So that's something that we look forward to seeing.
Yeah.
I believe he said next year,
Yeah,
possibly.
so definitely we'll try to get those back. But I know when we had our 50th episode, I think it was more episode for you and I because I don't think too many people watched the episode. But we talked. We were going to do a little more baseball, a little more Yankees. So let's talk a little bit about your beloved Yanks. First place right now looks like Boston is 10 games back, and you have Tampa Bay about I guess 2.5, 3 games behind. Did you watch any of the series over the weekend with LA?
Yes, and I try to forget about game two, but let me say this: the Dodgers with so many injuries, they're just loaded. They took 2 out of 3 from the Yanks. Okay. Then I think what we need to discuss now, currently, is the big news. Okay. Is losing Weaver. Okay. Who's been dominant, right, in the closer spot. I believe 24 strikeouts, 25 innings, 9 saves. a very, very, very low ERA, 1.24 maybe, I believe it was. He's out 6 weeks. Devin Williams now, by default, has to return to the closer's role. And I was very, very happy to see him get the save last night.
Little rocky, but he got it.
A little rocky, but let me say this. He didn't get hit too hard.
No.
He got the save. I really like the crowd chanting his name, trying to get behind him because, again, I don't remember ever in my life following the Yankees and them getting bit by the injury bug as bad as they have this season. Now you lose your de facto closer, I guess. I mean, now that puts Williams, that puts the target back on his chest. I mean, you got Cruz coming back. He could be some ninth inning help as well. But I mean, I think Boone has done a good job. I don't want to hear about the American League East not being as strong as initially projected. The bottom line is people want to focus on the weekend. Okay. The weekend is right now, the Dodgers are still light years ahead of the Yankees.
Well, and not to make any excuses too. They had that was the last series on a West Coast trip. So, they went out, they played Colorado, which Colorado's a whole other story. I think that was the worst. They're the worst franchise, and I think in 140 years they lost the game to that. But they also were out there with Seattle, and they played San Diego. So, I mean, it just to me, it was the last series, and I think besides Game 2, I think you look at Game 3 with Yarborough, he's coming on too, a young arm lefty who seems to be part of the pitching staff that they found that has carried this team. And Williams, obviously he's not Milwaukee. I like his stuff. I like his arm. I like the way he throws the ball. It's definitely something you can't pick up. Cleveland's an anemic offensive team, but they're still they were still a playoff team last year. So, and a win's a win. They're going to be a playoff team next year, Cleveland, but a win's a win. And, say what you want. I mean, Jazz Chisholm hitting a home run last night, LeMahieu coming back. Judge kind of cooled off, Goldschmidt kind of cooled off. But, to say the least, I like the pieces that were put together. And like you said, kudos to Boone, and also kudos to Cashman for putting his roster together. I think we said that on another episode. So,
yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I'll say this about the Dodger series: Yarbrough really saved the series because I think psychologically that would have been bad for the Yankees. All right, losing, getting swept, 3-0. He definitely saved the series. However, Dodgers are strong. There's no getting around that. They have a lot of injuries. Dave Roberts himself has said, they just wanted to kind of, stand pat, try to hold even, if you will, break even, until they get healthy. And the Dodgers are scary at this point. Okay. For the New York Yankees, they have to get healthy, as we know. But in June, I'm not really worried about the Dodgers. What happens in October, there's a lot that has to happen before these teams meet. I couldn't believe that they had another big injury, which was Weaver. I mean, it's really amazing. And I think, like you said, though, people have stepped up. Jazz coming back last night couldn't have happened at a better time. He homers, Volpe, they go back to back. A win is a win. It's a nice win. It's a little bit of confidence boost for Williams. He got the save. And I think since Williams, quote unquote, I don't want to say demoted, but was taken out of the closer's role, he has pitched very, very well. And, hopefully we expect that to continue. At some point, I think they're going to be forced to trade for an arm. That's inevitable. But I think Boone, who gets a lot of criticism, I think has done a really, really good job. And I think Cashman has done a good job in assembling this team. And it's almost amazing on the injuries that they had, the fact that, where they are at this point in the season. But I do expect, compared to really the last few years, I expect them to be a little bit more aggressive at the trade deadline, but time will tell.
Yeah, well, I think that in baseball now you have the haves and the have-nots. Even with Tampa Bay in the second place, they were talking about are they buying or selling? It's a small market team. Who knows if they're going to stay there. So baseball is definitely intriguing. And will once say, I watched a little bit of the Mets series too, but with Ohtani, I mean, he's the real deal. I would never. I mean, he's a tremendous player, and off Max Fried that first game, that fastball, first pitch of the game, and he parked it. I mean, he's a tremendous player. So it's something special to watch. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, that was his worst. Obviously, that was Fried's worst outing of the season.
Yep. But I
Hands
mean,
down.
listen, and I thought Rodon pitched well last night. Yeah, once again. So
He did.
he's definitely
He's a different guy with a beard.
So, but anyway, I know we're coming up to it, Jerry. But you have any predictions for the NBA Finals? You gonna root for Indiana for the East? You're
Definitely
gonna root. You're gonna
Definitely
go
not.
with OKC. So
I want to
yeah,
know if Reggie Miller is going to be okay after OKC does a number on them. But again, I'll be rooting for OKC. Again,
if you guys want the podcast to continue, nobody is rooting for Pacers in the NBA Finals. Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very well said. But I think OKC is a nice story. Especially young team. SGA.
Outside, let me say this, Dave. Outside of Pat McAfee and Reggie Miller, nobody's rooting for the Pacers.
That's really it. Maybe Mark Jackson's a little indifferent, but that's about it.
True.
Yeah. Well, Chris Mullin said those are the best 3 years of his career.
Yeah.
But
Run TMC. I disagree.
Yeah, I was a big Run TMC fan, but with that being
I
said,
want to say one thing though. This is for our favorite listener, Pat Monahan. The New York Red Bulls have won 3 in a row, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, after the Joe Jackson episode, our friend Pat Monahan lived at Greenville, South Carolina, right by.
Correct. He made that known.
Museum. He made that known to us. I actually invited him on for the 50th episode, but he says he's a shy guy. He didn't want to do it. So
yeah.
But
I don't know if he really got the invitation, but
yeah, I invited him. I even told Dave about it, but he didn't bite. But with that being said, Dave Sturcio is our producer. He's Chop Sports Media. Look out for July 14th. I think we're 45 days away from the war at the shore. So wrestling.
July 15th, Jimmy. July 15th.
July 15th. Sorry, July 15th. My mistake. I know it was in July, so I think it's on a Tuesday. So it's his second war at the shore too. But with that, I'll pass it along to Jerry to close this episode out. Look for more guests in the future. And please follow us on social media. We're on all platforms at Sports Consiglieres Podcast.
Hey, Dave, real quick, is there any way to add a match to your card? I was thinking Greg Giannotti with Boomer in his corner against Carl Banks with me in his corner to settle this thing once and for all. Their little tiff that they have going on. So
you know what? Not for nothing, but Gio went a little hard in the paint on him, but he shouldn't have. The name calling is a little rough, but it's not too far fetched of an explanation as to what we expect out of Towns and what he delivered in that game. So I'm on Team Gio, but he could have dialed it back a little bit.
Yeah. And Dave, I will always be on Team Banks, no matter what.
I used to eat lunch with that guy every Wednesday, him and Bob Papa, when I interned with the Giants. A lot of fun.
Tremendous guy. Both of those guys. But anyway, that wraps up episode 55, Gary Reasons, Hideki Matsui. And we will see everyone for episode 56 very, very soon. Go Yankees, and have a great day. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.